Hi everyone, Mark here, teacher for Your Yoga Flow Studio. Today I have a Hatha Basics tutorial part 1 for you, where we will be covering a few of the very basic Hatha poses that you'll find in most classes, and this will hopefully give you some insight into why these poses are included, as well as some tips and tricks that you can think about to really get the most out of your practice. Please subscribe to this channel, and this way you'll get notified the newest releases that we have for you, the newest practices and tutorials with our teachers. And in the description of this class, there's a special link that will take you to some free full-length practices with some of our amazing teachers at Your Yoga Flow Studio. So let's dive in. Hatha yoga is sort of the foundational form of yoga that most people are introduced to begin with, and any style of yoga that you find in a yoga studio or a class is essentially building upon Hatha yoga. So I thought it'd be really helpful to begin breaking apart all these different aspects of a Hatha yoga class, some of the poses, so we can really understand why these are included and how we can get the most benefit from them for our particular bodies. Just a caveat before we begin moving is that please adapt and modify any of these poses for your particular body. So really move with a sense of compassion and respect for your body exactly as it is today. So the first sort of sequence of poses that you'll probably come across quite often in a yoga class, especially a Hatha yoga class, is cat-cow. And to find our way into cat-cow, we come into what is known as tabletop position. Now, something to think about for tabletop position is to bring your wrists sort of directly under your shoulders. Place your knees under your hips with a little bit of a gap between your knees here. So sometimes this is called inner hip width apart. Spread your fingers wide and find a neutral spine. So that just means finding length through your spine. So the first shape, generally on an inhale breath, that we find is known as cow shape, where we begin to lower the belly towards the mat. We widen the collarbones and then look forward. Now, I'm not really sure why this is called cow pose, but it's called cow pose. I guess it's sort of similar to maybe the back of a cow. This is the inhale breath, and then on the exhale, we round the spine, press the mat away, and come into what's known as cat pose. Some teachers call this angry cat pose. So it's kind of like that Halloween cat position, a scared cat. And then with the breath, we flow in between those two shapes. So as you inhale, the belly lowers, the sit bones tilt up, collarbones widen, and the eyes move forward. And then on the exhale, we press into the mat with the hands, we round the spine, we draw the sit bones underneath. And then we flow. Lots of times in classes, the teacher will say, flow with your own rhythm of breath. And the idea here is that for the whole of the inhale and exhale, we're exploring this movement of the spine. And that's exactly what these particular poses are really great for, is for warming up the spine, for being able to notice how our spine is feeling at this moment in time, if there's any discomfort or any stiffness. And so this is cat-cow. Now, generally from here in maybe a Hatha class that I might teach, after we've done a few rounds of cat-cow, we come back to tabletop position, and then I'll cue my students into downward facing dog. Now, how I like to do that is to encourage people to move the hands a few inches forward on the mat and to widen the hands a little bit. So in my case, my middle fingers are at the outer edges of my mat. Yours may be there too, or they may be closer together or wider, depending on your particular body. Tucking the toes under, drawing the belly up and in, so starting to engage the core, and then pressing the hips up and back to downward dog. Now, I love a bend in my knees in downward dog. It's really important for my hamstrings to keep that bend in my knees. So you might be the same. My heels will never touch the floor. You might see on Instagram or on pictures of downward dog where people's heels are touching, and that is possible for some bodies. But for my body, that's not the case. So I keep a little bend in my knees, my heels are lifted up away from the floor. You can let your head just relax as feels necessary here. And the idea is that we're pressing into the hands, we're lifting the hips up and back, and we're lengthening through the spine. And this is downward dog. You might be asked to pedal out your feet in downward dog. That just means that you're walking on the spot, one heel pressing down and then the other. Just exactly like you were sort of, I guess, walking a dog. And then generally from downward facing dog, the next position I might move my students to, these poses are sort of connected, is a standing forward fold. So from a downward facing dog, we look forward, we bend the knees a little bit more, and then walking your feet towards your hands. I need to come up on my fingertips to be able to do that. Just like downward dog, I've got to bend in my knees because my hamstrings are really tight. This slight bend in my knees just helps me to be able to hinge at my hips a little bit more. My hands on the floor. You might have some props under your hands, yoga blocks. And if your spine is quite a bit tender, one great alternative is to bend the knees, to rest the elbows on the thighs, and to keep your spine quite lengthened. This is also great if you have high blood pressure or if you just don't enjoy the sensation of folding forward. Then keeping your spine nice and lengthened can be a really great alternative. So those are our 3 poses of part 1 of this series, connecting them together: cat-cow, downward dog, and then a standing forward fold. So lots of things to think about there. And hopefully there's some helpful tips and tricks that you can use in your own practice. Thanks for joining me today. I'll see you next time. Bye.